Alright, I'm going to show you guys two different ways to UV the screwdriver. First thing I'm going to do is just assign them a UV checker texture so that I can see what the heck I'm actually doing. And I just have one that I kind of perpetually keep stashed on my desktop for whenever I need to do UVing. It's just like this guy here. I got him off Google. If the texture doesn't display, you want to hit either 6, or you can come up here and just click on this like weird little checkered circle. So now that we have the UV texture displayed, I'll hide this guy for now. So I'll show you the way that I guess used to UV stuff like this. But you can see, so like if you just look at this, there's a lot of texture stretching like in here. Because when I made this, I pretty much just like started with a cube or whatever, and then extruded down, which does really gross things to the UVs. So like clearly these need to be fixed if you want this to display anything like an actual checker texture. So a lot of times what I'll do, for some reason I just like don't like cylindrical mapping. Like it totally works for some stuff, but like if you open your UV texture editor, you'll notice sometimes it does just like really weird stuff with like these guys up here. But in this case, if I want to do a cylindrical map, I'd probably just rotate this because I'm lazy. And then I'll do a... What am I doing? What am I doing? So a lot of times it makes sense to choose the UV map. So, okay. So when you pull up this cylindrical map thing, you'll notice you have these little handles here. You just want to drag it so it does a full circle around your model. You can kind of see that like as I drag this, it'll change like how the UVs seam together. So just drag that so it goes all the way around. And then this sometimes-ish kind of, it's really creepy. I was doing tests yesterday. So you'll see here that I have the UVs. I'm just going to put this back the way it was before. And you'll see the UVs for this part here because it's parented on this object, so I'm just going to unparent that. I just hit Shift-V because I don't want to look at that at the same time. So the reason I usually don't like cylindrical mapping, it does really good stuff like around this area in the handle, but you'll notice like at the top and bottom, it does whatever the heck this is, which is just like some awful pulling. So all I'm going to do is just right-click on this. Actually, what happens if this is either going to be really awesome or really terrible. So I'm just going to go to Modify, Unfold, and theoretically that should fix the like gross little end caps that it has here, or it's going to crash my computer. Yeah, okay. So it makes the UVs, they're not terrible, but it makes them, you know, a little bit wigglier, so if you need straight lines, it's harder to get that. So in this case, I think what I'm going to do is actually just undo that. And then I'll just come in and I'll grab some of these edges in here, and maybe just cut them so that the UVs don't need to stretch as much to actually, sure, I'll just cut all the way up there, that's what I wanted. They don't need to stretch as much in these end areas. And this is just sort of like a weird, like, dumb, tedious thing that you do. Is just, like, select all the edges you want to cut, come over to your UV editor, and do, go to right-click and do Cut and Sew, cut. So now, theoretically, if I were to select just the UVs at the top of this, and go to Modify, Unfold, it should unfold them, and you can see that now the bottom is at least a little bit kind of better-ish, sort of, than it was. Just for the sake of uniformity, I'm going to... that's actually my seam for the whole object. Gross. Alright, I'm going to change the seam of the entire No, I'm not. It's fine. Alright, I'm just going to ignore this down here. That's fine. Cool. So then I just want to do basically the same thing at the other end. So come over here and just grab maybe like every other one of these little triangles, right-click in your UV editor, Cut and Sew, and just do Cut. And then again, just grab those UVs, and go to Modify, Unfold. which did not do nearly as good a job as the other one. But yeah, so I mean, this is pretty much how I would lay out. Like, if I just wanted like even UVs, probably just start with the cylindrical map and then do something kind of not totally awful on the edges, hopefully. One thing that should be done, since these UVs up here are going off the edge of the texture map, I don't know if it's super noticeable, but you can kind of see like where the edge of the texture is. So if you just grab this whole UV shell and just scale it down so that it actually fits in your UV window, you'll notice that it has translate snapping turned on. If that's ever a problem, I don't know why they default to this, but in your UV toolkit, under the move tool, just turn off step snap, and then you can move it like a real person. Ooh, that's trippy. But yeah, so that's pretty much, I think, how I would, you can have this guy. There's still like a bunch of stretching in here, which is kind of gross. What if I try to do another unfold? That was the bottom. Whoops. Alright, so the bottom's like pretty kind of not terrible. I meant to do the top part. Alright, that's I guess a little kind of better-ish, sort of. And then again, just I moved the UVs when I modified them. They ended up being off the UV plane, so I'm just gonna scale that down ever so slightly. The other thing you can do is also go to, where is it? They moved everything. Optimize, unfold, pinch, symmetrize. Alright. There's an option for layout. Oh, here we go. It's under modify. Modify layout. If you click that, it should snap everything to the theoretically most efficient way to display it in the UV grid, so it takes up the maximum amount of space and uses most of your texture. Sometimes this works reasonably. Good for simple objects, absolutely trash for stuff like humans. It does a terrible job optimizing. Anywho, so here's like the first version of this screwdriver. You could also, if you wanted to, start with, okay. So I have another one over here. Half the time when I do stuff, and don't ask me why I do it like this, but half the time when I do stuff, I start with automatic mapping. So I would just go to automatic, and then you can see I start with way more pieces than I did last time. In this case, automatic mapping is probably a terrible decision to use for this, because like all of these little ridges in here, it's going to cut into like a bajillion little pieces. So normally how I go about fixing this is just pretty much just select every single edge. Yay, yay, yay. It's a very tedious process. For some reason, whenever I make people, I start with like an automatic map and then cut literally all of the faces apart, and then put them back together. So I'll just go to cut and sew, and then move and sew. What did I just click on? All right, I'm gonna do a UV layout really quick. Ah, I see what I did. Cut and sew, move and sew. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is gross. I'm actually just gonna advise to maybe don't do an automatic layout on this. It's a very irritating and not good object to do a automatic map with. Yeah, just don't use automatic for this. What I'd probably do, which like maybe the easiest way, theoretically, is to use the new UV tool that Maya put in 2018. So I'm just going to do a planar map on this to get some kind of UVs on. You can see that looks really fantastic. There's a lot of weird stretching here, which pretty much happens anytime you do a planar map on any object that's not just like a 2D image. So if I go to my UV menu, go down to 3D cut, and so UV tool. I can basically double click like anywhere on this object. So if I double click, it'll just cut the mesh wherever I clicked. So in this case, I can just go through like really easily, and just if I click and then shift click on another edge, it'll just put a little slice there. So that's all I'm doing for this. Is just going through and again slicing every other loop at the top and bottom of this, pretty much the same way that I did for the last one. So I'm just gonna go and hack this whole thing apart real quick. And you can see that went much faster than having to manually select each like move option, whatever. So now if I come in here to my UV editor, select the UV shell, modify, and I'll just do an unfold on that. And I clearly forgot to click on an edge up here. Yes, this is my edge that I missed. So I'm actually just gonna grab this and just cut it by hand because I'm lazy. So if I again unfold this, okay, I think I missed one on the other end as well. That's obnoxious. What? Ah, yeah, I did. Yeah. So if you ever see strange things like this, you just forget to cut an edge, so go back in and just cut that edge. You can do, if you click the edge in the UV editor, you should be able to do Shift X or Control X, one of the two. Oh yeah, it was okay. So that should be cut now. Modify, unfold. What do I just click on? You have to have this shell selected when you do an unfold, or else it's just gonna like try to unfold a single edge or whatever. Eventually. Really? Modify, unfold. There we go. Yeah, so you can see that this is unfolded. And these UVs are also perfectly reasonable for an object. These are probably like a little bit nicer and straighter. These are just gonna rotate this a little bit so it's kind of straighter-ish. And you'll notice again it's snapping, so I just need to go through and turn off the step snap and rotate as well. The legitimate most obnoxious thing ever. Anywho, so I'll just call that good. So you'll notice that if I look at these two dudes next to each other, they have the seam in different spots, and that's fine. This one seems to have done a little bit better job up here, having the texture be not stretched. And I think actually what happened, part of the reason that this is actually stretching is because it's trying to keep this like perfectly square grid. Like if I were to do an unfold just on these UVs down here, you can see it does snap them to be a much more sort of wiggly shape. But the UVs up here are a little bit less stretched for doing that. So it's not actually always bad to have your UVs wiggly. It just depends a little bit on what makes your life easier for laying out the texture in the end. In this case, I'm just going to keep them kind of square because it for some reason makes me happy. But yeah, so you'll notice, at least, so we'll look at like the main part of the handle down here. This one has really nice, like pretty much a perfect grid going on it. There's only a single seam down here. There's a bunch of seams at the end. That's kind of unavoidable for the most part. Yeah, so you'll notice that this is like really straight and nice overall. This one, again, still only has one seam, but the lines are a little bit curvier as you go down the screwdriver. This won't necessarily cause you problems in the long run. It's just like a difference of UVs. Sometimes this is totally unavoidable to have stuff like this. So if I wanted to just texture this, I can do it in Maya texture without pulling any files in. And I can do that by just laying out the UVs. So like this is the screwdriver, it's the tip of the screwdriver. Alright, so here's my screwdriver. Like this whole part up here is actually red. It's like a painted red sort of color. And then this down here is red. And then everything else is like this sort of clear glass texture. Clear plastic texture, whatever. I'm going to ignore the text for now because shrugs. So you can basically do the basic color with like the red and the clear if you lay out your UVs cleverly in Maya. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'll work with the screwdriver here. Oh, here, I'll do the tip of the screwdriver as well really quick. And I think I'm also just going to probably be lazy and do this with the with Maya's new tool because I think it's super nice and makes my life easier. Actually, automatic map would probably be a really good option for this. So we'll do that. So you can see it did a pretty reasonable-ish job cutting straight down the lines here. So I'll just go back in and sew some of these dudes together. And I'm just trying to get as few holes in, or as few seams in my UVs as possible. So I'm pretty much just going down each cut edge. My goal is to only have one cut edge on this object, kind of the same way that I only had one cut edge on the cylinder. And I'm just hitting G to repeat the cut command. You'll notice as I go, it's been stitching my UVs together really crazy, so I'm just going to select the shell, do a modify unfold, and then it should make my shell kind of less ridiculous looking-ish. And you can see now that the UVs on this are like relatively decent looking. The last thing I'm gonna do is just go and grab this, like these edges here, and do a move and sew, and do the same thing at the end, just so those little caps are attached. It doesn't, strictly speaking, hurt anything if they aren't attached. I just prefer having everything attached in one piece. It makes your life easier, I think, later. So I'll just do a modify unfold, and then I'll just do a modify layout, and then now it's at least in the UV plane. So here's my little screwdriver. So if I wanted to take this dude, and I'll just duplicate this so I have the original existing one. So it looks like on the original screwdriver, everything above maybe this line was red. So what I'm just going to do is select that line, do a cut and sew, and just cut that. So you'll see now, it's kind of hard, it's a little bit hard to see, but like if I select this shell, this is its own shell. And I just want to go through and basically do that and cut out all of these little areas in here as well. I'm going to use the sweet UV tool because it is nice and easy for this. So again, I'm just double clicking, going around all of the edges of these little sort of square things. And hide my ground plane. Just going around all of the edges systematically and double clicking to cut those. Cool. So you can see that now I have all of these as separate shells. What I can do now is actually take these shells and just move them over here. In this case, I'm not going to add any kind of extra like texture maps and stuff, so I don't really care if these overlap. Yeah, I'm just gonna grab these and make them all disgusting and overlapping. Why not? I'm gonna grab this guy. I'll just rotate him 90 degrees and also pop him right over here-ish, sort of. Cool. So now what I can actually do, I'm gonna save this. I will go into, I'm gonna delete history on this. And I'm gonna actually assign this a new material. And Arnold, AI standard surface, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this, I kind of don't want red, so I'm going to do blue. I'm feeling blue today. Sure. Let's call that halfway decent. Handle, relabel that. So what I want to do to get the sort of clear texture in here is modify the weight of the transmission. But I will show you that really quick. I'll actually just get a quick little render going real quick. Let me HDRI Haven, HDRIHaven.com. Cool, and I will grab something interesting that I haven't used 8 times before. I don't want studio lighting, that's awful. This looks fun. Cool. So grab this, I'm just going to throw this on my flash drive in my source images folder. I'm slowly amassing a small collection of HDRI images. Alright, cool. So I'm going to go into Arnold, Lights, Skydome Light, and then I'll just map in that HDRI from wherever the heck I put it. All files, yay. There we go. Alright, cool. Cool, so now I have in my HDRI. So I'm just going to do a really quick render of this. See what the heck happens. You can see is my test before. Alright, I'll take that. That's interesting coloration. Alright, so what I'm going to do, you'll see now that I'll leave that up. You can see now, so like the screwdriver, it just sort of exists as like a happy screwdriver. I'm going to say I kind of like the texture of that paint. So I'm going to go in now really quick and show you guys. If you map in a ramp to this, you'll notice when I do that into the transmission color, it makes half of it kind of more transparent. So what I'm going to do is just render this area again so you can see exactly what's happening. Excuse me. So you can see what's happening with the screwdriver. And you'll notice that part of it is clear now, kind of corresponding to where it was originally. The texture in the viewport, where that's transparent, it is also transparent in the render. I'm going to assign a new material really quick to the ground just to have some kind of file behind this. I'll do like a file texture and grab my face. Cool. So this is going to be really terrifying, but anywho. So if I go into my ramp shader, you'll notice right now that it has, I'm actually going to, so you'll notice that it'll display kind of the texture in your UV map. So I want to set this interpolation to none. When I do that, it's going to be a hard line between clear and blue, basically. So anywhere that it's set to 1, it's going to be clear, and anywhere it's set to black is going to be blue. But you'll notice, so if you look over here, the colors are being laid out horizontally, and I want them to be vertically. So if you go into type, just change that to URamp, and it'll lay out the colors in the way that I actually want and expect them to be laid out. So if I just drag this sort of black bit over, it should change the... This is actually really difficult with the UV editor open. So I'm going to actually close the UV editor. I'm just going to duplicate this object so I can see. So I'll use this guy to like select my colors and this one to actually look at. But you can see, so as I slide this ramp over, it's modifying the texture, and here seems to be the sweet spot where I get like these the blue streaks and also like the blue cap, but not the bits that are supposed to be clear being blue. So hopefully that kind of makes sense what I just did. I just set interpolation to be none instead of like one of the other options that'll give you a softer fade between the two. And then I just set this to be URamp because that makes more sense with my UVs. You can choose a bunch of different random things. It'll sort of show you the preview up there of what it's doing. But again, URamp works for this. So if I scroll out now, I'll just get rid of this dude. And I render whatever's in the current frame for better or worse. You'll see that I have basically the screwdriver that I was expecting there. Now you could also go through with this and map in other colors to like the transparency and stuff like that, but in this case it doesn't really, I don't care, like I'm not really using this for anything, so it's fine. One thing to be aware of with the clear stuff in Arnold, I say clear stuff, like the index of refraction, transmission, this kind of thing. If you make this partially clear, it doesn't necessarily like objects clipping through it too much. So I'm gonna just color this. I'm just gonna make it like a default chrome and just do a replace, and then make it ever so slow. Well, okay, so here's my turn on my resolution gate so I'm not rendering blind. Alright, so if don't render the whole frame. Okay, fine. So if I render this, you can see, it may be kind of hard to see, you can see it here, that it's like insanely shiny. So all I'm going to do for that, please stop rendering. So I'm just going to turn up the roughness a little bit on that texture. Maybe something like this, because I want it to be a little bit more brushed. And then I'll just re-render this little frame in here. And you can see it's definitely rougher. I'm going to make it a little less rough. I'm going to say that's probably fine. Cool. So assuming that I like that, I'm going to be like, alright, let me go in and look a little bit closer at this handle. So I had people asking me about making this sort of like water texture before. The setting that you guys want to edit for that is, I mean, this looks like pretty not terrible as it is. This computer is pretty laggy, sorry. Alright, so if I click on this guy, I go back to my handle. So the transmission is basically how clear this is. So in the areas where it's totally clear, the value is 1, because it's totally clear. The value here is 0 because I don't want to be able to see through that at all. If you go up to this is index of refraction under specular, and this is basically how the light refracts through the object. So by fiddling with this value, so if I set this to like the highest slider value here, and I re-render that, it should change how the light shines through that and kind of like what gets reflected through. You can see that it's like a little bit darker in here now, and that's just because the light is sort of bouncing through this object differently. I'm not going to try to explain exactly what an index of refraction is, but if you want to change the sort of look on the inside of your clear bit, this is what you'd use. These are the settings you'd probably also fiddle with if you're doing something like water or something like that. You can see if I set this to 0, it just pretty much makes the entire thing like a smooth giant blob of awkwardness. No, don't render the whole frame, that was dumb. Incidentally, having refraction in here like this will absolutely make your renders take longer. So that is totally something to be aware of. In this case, I'm just going to be lazy and leave this with the default like 1.520. So again, I'll just like re-render this little frame to make a point. So you can see it you know, comes through and reflects pretty nicely. One thing you can also do that's really neat is actually you can tint your basically plastic in this case. If you change the color of this, it will add a tint to your plastic. So now it's like a weird green screwdriver instead of clear plastic. So like if you wanted to do something like that, you totally could. I don't know, that's hideous. I like playing with this kind of stuff, it's fun. But that is an option that you can take advantage of, should you choose to. But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much how I would UV the screwdriver to texture it later. You can also, if you wanted to add like a texture map in something like Photoshop, you could go in and just create that basically like that U ramp automatically. So like if I select this object, go to shoot, it's in the UV editor now. They moved literally all of the stuff for the UV editor, and I can still never remember where any of it is. It's terrible. So I select that object, go to my UV editor. If I go to Image, UV Snapshot, UVs, I'll do screwdriver handle, apply. Alright, so theoretically now if I go into my source images, it should have created somewhere. Source image. Oh, whoops. It's saving in a completely different spot. So I usually just save these in my my images folder. I don't really know why. Alright, so I'll just apply that like a real person. Go into my images folder, and you'll see that it made this UVs file here, which basically has like a snapshot of my UVs. So if I were to go into Photoshop, where's Photo? Oh my god, okay. If I were to open Photoshop, I could basically lay out my textures like this. And a lot of times, if the colors of the model correspond to where the lines of the model are, so like the screwdriver basically was a really good example of this, I will totally just cut apart my UVs like this, because it makes everything really, really easy to deal with. So if I went to Photoshop, alright, I'm going to add just like a black background so you can actually see. Cool. So now you can see my UVs. So in this case, what I could do if I wanted this to be like a different colored object is be like, cool, here's a, I'll make this like weird red color, yay, and I'll make this perhaps everything behind it just be, I don't know, I'd say give me a color, but no one's here right now, so sure, blue. Why not? Red and blue. I'll make a red, white, and blue screwdriver. Oh my god, I'll make clicking buttons. Alright. So if I, for some reason, decided that I liked this texture, what I could do is just go out and save this as like a random PNG. Ideally, it would be my source images folder. I'll throw it under textures and just make this a PNG. Red, blue. Sure. Descriptive titling. Alright. So, I'm going to just assign this a new material to make a point. I'll make it a Lambert because I don't really care. So I'll map in that texture I just created into the color channel of this beautiful Lambert. Ooh, cool. So you'll see that it pretty much maps into colors exactly the same way that the ramp shader did. It's just with a texture file. So like if I wanted to make the red have some kind of pattern or something like that on it instead, let's see here. I could go to my desktop, find this terrifying picture of my face, which seems to be like the weird default thing I've been using for everything now. And I'll just create this thing. So if I were to save this now, still keep this a PNG, and put it in my source images folder. Sure. So I just overwrote my new, my old texture because I was being lazy. So in this case, it's still called the same thing. What I'm going to do is just press reload, and now you can see that I have like a weird texture sort of mapped into this area. But yeah, so I mean, hopefully that makes sense. It's just sort of one way you can cut up your UVs, so you don't need to do a lot of extra work with texturing to like get stuff in the right place. So like if I come back into Photoshop, because it's easier to look at. So like if these are those little holes on the side, or like those little indents on the side of the handle. So like if I wanted them to be colored, what I would basically have to do if the UVs weren't separated like this is go through with something maybe like the polygonal lasso tool and just trace along the UVs, and then I would like color this area in red, and then maybe come back if I made the texture look bad And it's just like really tedious. Like you can do it, and sometimes you need to do it like this, but depending on your model, you can totally just chop stuff up and have it separate, and that's totally fine. But yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. Here's like the weird sort of flesh screwdriver. Yeah,